Okay, now we've gone live. Let me do the protocol of. Perfect. Can you see the PPT?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Visible.
So we are carrying on with our MDI 007, and today we are doing labor surplus theory and dualism. See, more if you would have noticed the last few units, economists or see, first you need to understand an economy or economy as a subject or economics as a subject is not a science. In the sense that you cannot test it in a lab and then bring out the results. So more often than not, economists were doing conversations in the particular time frame or the context and coming out with these theories. Their larger concern was how to make sense of the way things were moving in terms of wages, in terms of production, in terms of unemployment or employment or poverty. And more often than not, most of these economists tended to come from the Western world where there was already a sense of development. And now they were trying to look southwards into the underdeveloped world or the third world, as they say. And they were getting theories how to make sense. For example, Keynesian, he saw when the Great Depression happened, he tried to make sense of why the depression happened and why the U.S. economy in the world and the developed economy failed, and came out with policy prescriptions of government intervention and so on and so forth. So today we are doing this labor surplus theory and dualism, and the objectives are concepts involving surplus labor. So we are talking about the concept of surplus labor. Again, as I keep telling you, economics or economic uh, aspect is a large aspect of migration and diaspora, and that's possibly why this is a large bulk of units in terms of economics. Also, the way the SLMs have been written requires you to have some sort of a base in economics. In case you do not have that base, do not get stuck with the formulas and the graphs. What I try and do is give you a macro perspective as to why we are doing these thinkings or talking this way. So I present to you in a very simplified form, which you should be able to grasp in terms of the larger aspect of the economic aspect of labor, and then we will plug in to see why labor moves or what typically happens. Analyze impact of theories of surplus labor, and these terms, what typically also you can do is look at these terms, some specific keywords like surplus labor. You can note down these keywords and then either read more about it in case you are interested, or plug in into the larger. So if there is a surplus labor, obviously there is a chance of unemployment. If there's a chance of unemployment, then there is a higher probability of migration than if there is no surplus labor. So before we start, there is a quick pop quiz. We are going to do a pop quiz. So all you need to do is answer me in terms of a chat, or come on the mic. And so what is the change in output? And this is based on the first unit of this economic theories, MDI 007. Change in output of goods and services and income over time is called what? So who can answer this? You are
GDP.
What is the question? Can you repeat again?
on the screen. Can you see the screen?
GDP.
The change in output of goods and
Question
services.
number one: change in output of goods and services and income over time. What is it called? What is the term for this?
Okay. Change in.
You are free to consult your Google or your notes or whatever.
Is it GDP?
No. Anybody take another guess?
output.
De development, maybe.
You're talking about productivity,
Sir,
sir?
can
Productivity?
We are talking about economic growth.
sir can be growth rate?
Yes, it is economic growth. So every time we talk about change in output of goods and services and income over time is normally comes under the heading of economic growth. Okay, guys.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Question number two. Quantitative as well as qualitative changes in economy of which economic growth is only a part. What do we call that?
Development, maybe.
Absolutely. Aisha, development. You are absolutely right. So inevitably, development, economic growth is only in terms of things, goods or services. Development is not only quantitative but qualitative changes. And whenever we're talking about qualitative, we are involving human beings. Okay. Question number three. Three component indicators: infant mortality, life expectancy, and basic literacy. What is the development factor that we talk about?
Um,
This is
Sir,
human HDI. HDI.
No,
sir, progress.
no, it's not progress. There is a particular development indicator that we talk about when we talk about indicators, that is infant mortality, life expectancy, and basic literacy. So the indicator that we talk about is PQLI, Physical Quality of Life Index. Okay.
Nice, sir.
Okay. Question number four. Three components: longevity measured by life expectancy at birth, knowledge measured by educational attainment, and income measured by GDP per capita in PPP dollars.
This is HDI, Human Development Index.
Absolutely, this is HDI. So, in fact, in the first unit, we talked about how we looked at the economists looked at economic growth initially, but they realized the fact that economic growth was not a reliable parameter in a development of a country, and subsequently PQLI and HDI were looked at, Human Development Index, to look at development. Okay, fifth and the final question: inequalities in resource endowments, physical and human, as well as growth and development indicators such as income, unemployment level, trade and related indicators of living conditions across countries and even within them.
Disparity, maybe.
Correct. Regional disparities in development. So, so if you see, more often than not, try and go, logically. Do not get stuck on the economic theorems or the formulas or the graphs. Look at what logically it should be in terms of disparity. So keep it simple. You'll be able to circumvent the economics part of this unit. Okay. Okay, let's start with the introduction. And more often than not, if you see, as I said, economics not being an exact science in the sense that one could test it in a laboratory. These were conversations with the economists were having at that particular realm of time, and more often than not they were trying to make sense of, and it all started with Adam Smith, the classic economic model of supply and demand. But they were not able to answer why, this persistence of poverty is happening or unemployment is happening, and why were these things happening, and they were trying to make sense and giving solutions to that. So initially, they thought that the supply demand should be able to handle the whole economy, and the supply demand will be able to give just wages, subsistence wages, and the government should intervene. Then the Great Depression happened, and Keynesian economics talks about government intervention, which subsequently has moved to neoliberalism, which is very similar to neoclassical economics, where they said government should not intervene. And if you see, there is like the business cycles of going up and going down, the economic theories also seem to be moving up and down. a number of economists attempted to analyze development in the context of labor surplus economy. And what were the labor surplus economies? The countries which had just got independent, who were underdeveloped. Again, to a certain extent, look at the fact that there were these people sitting in developed economies trying to understand the sense of underdevelopment, and that is why a lot of policy prescriptions were given by them which did not make sense to the countries which just got independence. So in fact, in the next week's unit, we will look at some theories of underdevelopment, how these people were trying to make sense. So some of these theories owe their origin to the work of author Lewis, Sir Author activity surrounded by large rural traditional sector. So if you see Indian economy also, there is a very large preponderance of agriculture sector, which is considered a traditional economy. And innovative. And again, if you have a policy prescription given by the Western country, by any Western country, which has a very different mix of, which has a lower population, B, a less population involved in agriculture because their agriculture got modernized and so on and so forth, and everything moved into the services sector. Now, when you have a policy prescription and you try and implement it on a country like India or any other developing countries, obviously there are gaps. So let's see how this dualism worked. Let's start with defining what is a LDC or least development country, least developed countries. So there are multiple terms which are thrown around: underdevelopment, developing, least developed countries. So what are developed countries? Developing countries that, according to UN, exhibit the lowest indicator of socio-economic development, with the lowest HDI of all countries in the world. In fact, more often than not, nowadays, HDI is the way to measure development. So, for example, in India, the state of Kerala has very high HDI, in terms of socio-economic indicators. A country is classified least developed if it meets three criteria. So, what are the three criteria? Poverty. So, you don't need to remember that US dollar 1025. GNI stands for gross national income. Now, gross national income is different from GDP and GNP. Though, so GNI is the total income which is out of all activities, including remittances, including economic aid, including foreign aid, which comes in, all those collected is GNI per capita. Now, always a per capita is a dicey measurement, because let's look at the fact, if there are two people, one earns 999 rupees and the second earns 1 rupee, the per capita income of these two people will be 50, which gives a very erroneous feeling that there is everything fine. So per capita is always kind of difficult to figure, but that's how these measurements have done. Human resources weakness based on indicators of nutrition, health, education, and adult literacy.
So this
And
sorry,
yeah, bolo,
um,
Shah.
so this 1,000 is per month or
Uh,
annually?
this is annual. GNI per capita less than 1025.
Okay.
Gross national income is typically calculated annually, financial year. And economic vulnerability based on instability of agriculture production, instability of exports, importance of non-traditional activities, merchandise, export concentration, percentage of population displaced by natural disaster. So this is how, more often than not, they have given indicators and calculated. So which are the LDC countries? So for example, in Asia, these are some of the LDC countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Myanmar, Nepal, Yemen. So these are some of the LDC countries in Asia. Again, remember, these are measurements. How you do the measurements, who is doing the measurement. So there are margins of error, but these are broad-based definitions they have given. So, for example, if you were to look at India, these were India's GNI in 2023 to 2020. Now, if you notice, in 2020, India's GNI fell by 8.17% from 2019. That was possibly because of COVID coming in or other factors, but it has subsequently been increasing. Though, if you see, the 2023 actually did not increase as much from 2022 as 2022 from 2021. That also because there was a lockdown. As the lockdown opened, suddenly it expanded and then settled down at 5.83 increase from 2022. So this is India's GNI. I wanted to
So-
put this. Yeah, Aisha, who's that? Somebody said something.
Yeah, sir.
Bolo.
Um, yeah. So I was saying, so for example, if overall everybody's salaries are decreasing, but say a billionaire is getting richer,
Hmm.
so in that case also the per capita would
GNI.
increase, right?
See, GNI also, as I said, is based on remittances, all the money which is coming in. It could be foreign aid. So all that, so possibly remittances have increased. So it does not give you exactly the picture what will help you make a policy.
No, I'm just asking hypothetically. Say all everybody's salaries decreased, but there is a billionaire
Correct,
whose
correct,
income
correct, correct.
increased. That would also overall
Correct.
show that.
Increase the per capita. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I said per capita is always a bad indicator because you do not know exactly what is happening. So there might be in a population of 100, there might be one guy who would have 99%. And this is what we are seeing news item that the wealth of the richest Indians have increased by 10%, and for the rest of the population, 90% has fallen. So these are how you try and understand things and then make policy. Governments are supposed to take this data and then make policy. Aisha?
Yes, sir. That's what I was thinking. That.
Absolutely. So, what is dualism? Let's start, as I said, always start with the definition and who defines it. It have been put forward, mainly refers to economic and social divisions different in an economy, such as difference in technology, sectoral difference, regional difference. We see dualism all around. So, for example, there's a social dualism. Social dualism is like the traditional, activities or rituals are done along with, let's say, the Western rituals. And typically, more often than not, if you will see, a lot of times modernity is equated with Westernism. So that also works out, difference in social customs, attitude, indigenous, imported social system. Inevitably you will see there is dualism. There is dualism in social, there is dualism in culture, there is dualism in technology, in production ways, and so on and so forth. So while, for examples, a lot of agriculture, there are large land holdings in places like Punjab, Haryana, there are very small land holdings in UP, Bihar, or Jharkhand. So this is dualism. While on one hand, there is farmers in Punjab, Haryana, and other places would produce, produce which is exported or sold outside. UP, Bihar is more subsistence. So that is dualism. Condition in which developing countries may find themselves in early stages of development. And more often than not, as I said, because these scholars or these economists or these thinkers were Western based, they kind of looked at how their country evolved, and they were making deductions out of that. The extent of dualism may have implication for future patterns and pace of development. So they kind of thought, or they kind of propounded, that all countries take the same path of development. In fact, again, as I said, next week when we take up theories on development, we will see how this premise itself is flawed. Since the future development of any country requires the spread and expansion of modern sector, any efforts to accelerate the country's rate of development must deal with the problem of dualism. So essentially, what they say is the problem lies in the country and its people and its institution. And once that problem gets sorted out, the dualism is removed. the country will accelerate on the path of development. More often than not, the premise was that each country would develop. So various type of dualism. There are social dualism. There is technology dualism. Different types of production. And if you see around when we look around in our own country, we see that there are there is traditional agriculture where there is labor being employed. There is technology which is being employed. So there is a sort of dualism which happens. This existence of dualism accentuated the problem of structural technology unemployment. And what is structural employment? For example, a particular industry needs people who have a particular skill which is not possibly available in a certain sector of the country. And youngsters who come from that places in the country are not able to get employment. The people are there, they are willing to give their labor, but they are not equipped. Similarly, technology comes and unemploys people. So rather than moving into different different occupations to take care of the technology. For example, today, if a child does not know how to do, let's say, Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, he cannot be employed in any normal corporate office or a company. Now, that's a technology unemployment. Then there is geographical dualism, nations and backward regions, persistence of spatial difference of white. For example, interestingly, there is in Haryana, for example, I stay in a place called Gurgaon. 40 kilometers from Gurgaon is a place called Mewat. And if we look at the socio-economic parameters of Gurgaon and Mewat, including per capita income, there's a huge disparity. Mewat is supposed to be socio-economically backward region of Haryana and is just 40 kilometers separated. So there is a dualism. The existence of this dualism not only retards the development of backward regions, but can also slow down the development of the whole economy. Then, for example, there is dualism of finance, coexistence of different interests between organized and unorganized. So today, if like for example, in an organized sector, you get a loan from a bank, but to get a loan from the bank, you need to have certain conditions to get a loan. For example, a collateral, you need to have documents that you have given an income tax return and so on and so forth. A lot of people get loans from money lenders from the unorganized market, where the interest rates are much higher because the risk is higher. So that dualism is also there. So inevitably, labor surplus and dual labor market theory, least developed countries conceive to operate in two sectors: traditional agriculture sector, smaller and more modern industrial sector. If you see today also in India, for example, a large part of the population is rural based, involved in agriculture. So this is how the dual economy functions. There's an agriculture sector, there's a manufacturing sector, and the agriculture sector is denoted by low profitability, income elasticity, low growth opportunity, subsistence farming. As I said, small land holdings will result in more often than subsistence farming, because whatever you grow, you're consuming in the family. There is manufacturing, there is profit, higher productivity, rising wages, opportunity for trade. So then there is this concept of surplus labor. Now, more often than not, it is assumed the fact that because agriculture is a traditional sector, it involves a huge population or a huge amount of labor, so much so that marginal productivity of labor is zero. Now, what is marginal productivity? We talked earlier. Marginal productivity, if I add one more person to an existing infrastructure of work, there will be no difference whether I add a person or remove that person. The productivity will not go up. Normally, industrial activity is also governed by marginal productivity of labor. So if I add one more labor in a factory, how much productivity will go up? or how much profit will the company make more. So if a few workers are removed from land, the total product remains same. Today they say that Indian agriculture has got a lot of surplus labor, as is other underdeveloped countries, or including least developed countries. Now there's a difference between underdeveloped and least developed. Least developed are the lowest in the underdeveloped system, and India more often than not falls. Sometimes it is called underdeveloped, sometimes it's called developing. So it is a notch higher than underdeveloped. And one of the things about development process is transfer of labor resources from the agriculture, where they add nothing, to more modern industry. This was the policy formulations they talked about, that agriculture being a traditional sector, marginal productivity of labor is almost zero. So if we are able to take this labor out and push it in the industrial sector, where they would add productivity, which will lead to the rising of products, the industrial products, which will increase aggregate demand. This aggregate demand will lead to more money coming in. That money will get plowed back into the industry and the development process which accelerate. That was the sum substance of how this theory was formulated. Lewis model transformation process starts when autonomous expansion in demand in industry result in change in the domestic consumers, taste, government purchases, or in international market. So more often than not, the linchpin of this development model was the industry, which we have seen more often than not. Classical economics talks about the same supply and demand. It was supply and demand in a different way, in the sense that the surplus labor is taken from the agriculture sector and pushed into the industrial sector. In fact, when you are taking the labor from the agriculture sector and pushed in the industrial sector, you are anyway talking about migration, because agriculture sector is rural, industrial sector is urban. The central point is that labor shifts from agriculture to industry. Supply of labor and supply is unlimited, completely elastic at any given urban wage, to large number of agricultural labor forces at the margin. So most of these workers in the agriculture market are so much at the margin that even if you take out some workers, agriculture will not get affected. And because they are already taking lower wages in agriculture, if they move into the industry, the industrial output will rise, the wages will remain constant, the wages will not go up. Phenomena is frequently labeled disguised unemployment in agriculture. Supply of unskilled labor to industry at existing wages will hold on labor costs. Higher demand and higher prices in industry result in higher profit. So if you notice, it still talks a lot about the classical economics, supply demand, and making profit, the capitalism model. You need to understand, because these economists were already sitting in the capitalist model, and they felt that this was the model which will work best for the underdeveloped countries. When the profits are plowed back into the industrial capital formation, demand for industrial output will rise, causing further shifts of labor out of the industry. And this will stabilize once the marginal productivity in agriculture equals the marginal productivity in industries. So once they stabilize, then the country is already on the path of development. When the agriculture rises to a point, supply, in the absence of rural-urban divide in the cost of living, this occurs when the marginal product of labor in the two sectors are equal. So somewhere down the line, so if you notice, this also is talking about supply and demand. So everybody built on the classical economic theory of supply and demand, and there is a keen capitalist model at the back of everybody's mind. Lewis defined the capitalist sector as that part of the economy which uses reproducible capital. So, what I was saying, most of these economists came out of the capitalist model of things. They came out of the classical economic theory of supply and demand, and they kind of refined those theories to kind of suit their viewpoint of what was going around. The use of capital is controlled by capitalists who hired services of labor. Subsistence sector was defined as that part of the economy which was not using reproducible capital, described as an indigenous traditional sector or self-employed. So they always categorize self-employment as a subsistence sector or a traditional sector. And every time a theory came out, there were certain assumptions. So what was the assumption of Lewis model? Assumed that a developing economy has a surplus of unproductive labor in the agriculture sector. Agricultural labor are attracted to the growing manufacturing sector where higher wages are offered. Wages in the manufacturing sector more or less fixed. And we have seen, the wages though are not fixed because they work on multiple factors of possibly government intervention, of trade unionism, etc., etc. But these were the assumptions Lewis model made before they brought up the Lewis model. Entrepreneurs in manufacturing sector make profit as they charge price. It is assumed that this profit will be reinvested in business in the form of fixed capital. So these were the assumptions. Surplus labor can be used instead of capital. They also talked about the fact that all this surplus labor can be used instead of capital in creating new industrial investment projects. Essentially, the movement of labor. They identified clearly in this model that the traditional sector has surplus labor, and this surplus labor can be used elsewhere to increase the pace of economic growth and hence development. Although labor is assumed to be in surplus, it's mainly unskilled, but that is not a problem because that unskilled labor can be skilled. Technical process needed for growth required skill. The bottleneck can be overcome through provision of training and education facilities. And if you notice, a lot of companies do the same. In fact, today also, when we look at industrialization or the industries, how they function, they assume the fact that there is this natural skill and development which is required. There are this, possibly the ITI was formed in terms of skilling this unskilled labor and putting it in the industry. So obviously with this assumption and this model, there was bound to be some criticism. Theory assumes a constant wage rate in capitalist sector until the supply of labor is exhausted from the subsistence sector. This seems to be unrealistic because wage rate continuously rises over time in the industrial sector. So again, as I said, economics is not a science in a way that it can be tested in the lab and brought out. These were typically conversations. These were people or thinkers, scholars who were economics comes under the discipline of social science. So these were looking at the world and trying to make sense of how things were. They were looking at poverty, they were looking at unemployment, they were trying to find solutions to it. The assumptions of unlimited labor supply in underdeveloped countries, again, not relevant, not applicable to countries like South America and South Africa. It is applicable to Asian countries. Exist in rural areas, there is a full whereas there is a full employment in the urban sector. So there is, but we also know the fact that just because if you are aware of the rural sector, even if a person may not be employed, he or she may not be willing to move because of various considerations to an industry or to an urban area. We have seen that if we assume unlimited supply of unskilled labor, then the supply of skilled labor is definitely limited. Now, what is the cost of skilling those labor? Are those people equipped to be skilled? Create difficulties in carrying out programs of industrialization and economic development. It is not necessary that you set up an industry and I'll typically give you an example. So interestingly, they started this economic zones, and I was giving you this example of Gurgaon and Mewat. Mewat has this economic zone in a place called Rose Ka Mio, where they set up these industries, and they gave incentives for industrialists to come and set up industries. Now the thing is, the industrialists set up industries, but where is the labor? The local population is not educated, not skilled. And if you get population from outside, what happens? How do you set up the population? How do you give them an environment where they you set up a township? There are so many things in setting up an urban area in terms of avenues for entertainment, for movement, for stuff to so urban areas or urban amenities is not easy to provide. Problem in skill formation are not easily overcome. So, for example, there is a diamond cutting unit out there, but all the labor has to come from outside because to get the locals to be skilled requires a huge amount of investment. Especially in backward and underdevelopment, and that is why a lot of times when industries are come up in backward areas or underdeveloped areas, more often than not they fail, because end to end and last mile problems are not looked at. How do you set up a township? Where will the people come from? If the people come from, what happens to their families? If families come in, then education, health, there are so many things. Does not consider the possibility of progress in agriculture sector. That's a one-sided story. So, if you see again, major economists are of the opinion that panacea of underemployment and poverty lies in industries, not in agriculture. As the industrial sector develops with the transfer of surplus labor, the demand for food and raw materials will also rise, which will in turn will lead to growth in agriculture sector. This was also a flaw in this particular theory. So rather than look at the agriculture sector, they were looking at the industrial sector. Theory of unlimited supply of labor is based on the assumption that the capitalist class exists within the underdeveloped country, and also this capital which is accrued needs to be plowed back into the industry. But we have seen, especially for example, in the Indian capitalist class, a lot of the money or the capital which gets accrued is not plowed back, but is taken into speculation. It may encourage speculative activities. Large number of existing entrepreneurs turn into speculators to reap extra gains. A rising level of profit does not necessarily induce rising level of reinvestment. For example, when you have a windfall of money in terms of bonuses or something, more often than not, you do not invest. A large part of it might be spent in taking a vacation or in luxury items, which is the same in terms of industry. Neglects the problem of aggregate demand, assumes that whatever is produced is consumed by itself or exported, fails to consider the demand for product of capitalist sector by the subsistence sector. And if there is no money in the subsistence sector, the demand will not come up. If there's a shortage of demand for the products of the capitalist sector, the growth process will come to a halt. So underdeveloped countries, especially with large populations, have many different issues to grapple with rather than a straightforward industrial policy formulation. So that was the criticism of Lewis' model. It also perpetuates unequal distribution of income, migration from rural population to urban sector does not happen. Or generally observe that high income group dissipate the saving on unproductive things, which we have already talked, pushes the wages down, which results in widening income gap. Because and again, if you look at the labor chalks today, there is a large amount of labor, pushes the wages down. When the wages go down, aggregate demands goes down, then migration is not as easy as pointed out. Labor is difficult to transport, deep affection for land and homes. So when the lockdown happened during COVID, everybody wanted to go back to their villages because the rural economy is still, you can sustain yourself out of land. In an urban area, it is very difficult because there is no land. How do you sustain yourself? Then there are socio-cultural barriers to occupation and geographical. Certain people will not do certain work because socio-cultural barriers. For example, caste-based barriers, certain castes will not do certain work and will hinder the migration of workers. Lewis model was upgraded or tweaked by two economists called Fay and Vanis, and Fay and Vanis model of dual economy came in. These are economists John Fay and Gustav Vanis as an extension to Lewis model. The FR model explains how increased productivity in agriculture sector would become helpful in promoting the industrial sector. They talked about three stages whereby underdeveloped countries move from stagnation to self-restraint. It was there were a lot of equations and theories. If you look at your SLM, the SLM has gone in detail in explaining the theory. I don't think you should go into it again unless you have a background of economics, because it dwells too much into economics, which defeats from the larger understanding of the economic model and the reason why we are reading about them. Their premise is there is an abundance of labor in such underdeveloped countries and shortage of natural resources. Population growth is high, which results in mass employment. Unemployment, major share of population engaged in agriculture, but agriculture sector is stagnant. Somewhere down the line, there also is, you get a feeling that it appears that they do not look at agriculture sector with the kind of seriousness which the agriculture sector should be given in terms of productivity, in terms of how it can grow. We have also seen that agriculture sector has a lot of potential, a lot of technology can be pushed into the agriculture sector, leading to increase outputs, with things like animal husbandry, with things like livestock and so on and so forth. A lot of people can be occupied. The model suggests in a dual economy, there's a stagnant agriculture sector and a dynamic industrial sector. Uh, India has a very interesting economic model because in India, the industry really didn't take off. In fact, the traditional agriculture today is almost parallelly working with the services sector. So India kind of leapfrogged the industrial sector. Though after Indian independence, the first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and the government gave a lot of emphasis on large industries, but we have seen subsequently the industrial sector did not take off the way it should have in a development scenario. The real wages in industrial sectors remain fixed and is equal to the initial level of real income in agriculture sector, wages as institutional wages. So there are many more issues in an economy, the way it functions. And when we go through all these units, we realize that when we think of economy, we think of it in a very simplified term, but it is all linked and there are many complications in it. Let's quickly sum it up. We are, yeah, pretty much on time. One of the pioneers of what we now call development economics, presented a dualistic model of economic development on the assumption that there is an unlimited supply in labor, in less developed countries. Modern industrial capital sector grew, their vast surplus labor would be absorbed. So this model also focused on unemployment and poverty. So what we call as development economics. There are some references: Therabal, Fay and Ranis and Lewis. There are other references given in your SLM. When you go through that, you can see that. Let me stop it here. Let me start my video. Hi guys. Any question that I can answer? As I said, I have tried to keep. If you go through the SLM, there are a lot of equations and graphs. Unless you have an economics background, do not get stuck onto this. Understand the larger aspect of it. We have been going through classical economic theories. Now we are coming to development economics theories. Idea was that these economists were trying to look at poverty, unemployment, and we also have seen that economic determinants are one of the largest determinants for migration, and migration leads to diaspora. So that is how this connection is there, and that's how I have tried to simplify and explain it to you. Any questions?
Sir,
Yeah, good be.
sir, as you concluded the today's lecture that agriculture sector is not taken care of so much that is required. Sir, my submission is the current problem of paddy procurement in the Punjab mandis. They have been the farmers have been told that the rice is broken in many pieces. So a lot of such problems. Marketing, diversification, grading,
True.
Value addition.
True.
Then there are many factors that can be taken care of.
True.
And sir, agriculture is at the problematic state, as you said, and the shifting of agricultural labor to the urban areas does not seem to be practical, as you already taken the points like wages, livelihood, food,
Correct.
and families, etc. So agriculture need more attention.
Correct.
Is it true?
Absolutely. Agriculture. See, agriculture, every industry, including agriculture, is much more complex than we can fathom in a simplified understanding. I'll give you a very interesting example or a story. So, we in the North India face a lot of pollution because of stubble burning. Now, how did stubble burning start? There's a multiple stories which join in this story. The large land holdings of Punjab, Haryana, Eastern UP, Western UP started using technology in terms of combined harvesters. Previously, what used to happen was there used to be labor, human labor, which would come and cut stalks of rice stalks. Now, when you cut a stalk with a equipment, a human being, you cut right from the ground. Whereas when you run a combined harvester, which is a technology, you leave a certain stalk hanging because the machine has to move. Now, when the machine has to move, there is a stalk which is hanging. Now, how do you take out that stalk? It does not work with plowing. So now this stalk needs to be removed. Now, if you get labor to remove the stalk, then agriculture is already unproductive in terms of the cost involved in inputs. The output is not equal to the cost involved in input, and that is why the farmers are pushing for minimum support price. But the fact is, there was also another problem. Another problem was because rice is planted in a large area of Punjab and Haryana. Rice needs a lot of water. Now farmers started using groundwater to irrigate their crops. When they started using groundwater, the level of groundwater fell. So what the government did was delayed the planting of rice to coincide with monsoon. When they delayed the planting of rice, the harvesting gets delayed. Harvesting gets delayed. Now the harvesting happens in October, November when it cools down, and there is a stock which is left because of combined harvester. Now, what to do with the stock? Farmers start burning it because that became a simple solution, and burning also destroys the pest in the fields.
Otherwise, delay of wheat sowing, sir.
Otherwise, delay of wheat. Also understand it's like a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt has to look at the inputs, where the inputs are coming. Are the inputs of good quality? Are the people who are running the conveyor belt skilled? Are the output good? Is there a marketing and selling? Is there a market for that product? Now, all these things again, every economist looked at the industry.
Sure.
Everybody forgot that the underdeveloped countries, especially the countries which had just been, independent, had a large agriculture sector. So
Sure.
rather than look at the agriculture sector, everybody looked at the industry to do faster growth, because all these economic theories were looking at industry, and agriculture sector obviously was growing willy-nilly. And now we have reached a stage whereby we do not know which to control.
True, sir.
So, Gurpreet, every industry, every sector is complicated, requires a lot of thought, vision, and because a country like India is so diverse and so populous, so any policy for Punjab may or may not work for Haryana, even though they are neighboring states. And anything for Punjab and Haryana will never work for places like Bihar, Gujarat, or MP. We still want to go through some sort of a centralization because it becomes easy to dispense policy formulations in a centralized way. And we've seen it does not work because the diversity is phenomenal. So, Gurpreet, you're right. Agriculture requires much more. And obviously, that's why the problems accentuate. Gurpreet,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
any other question? We are very much on time. We have the
sir,
next
Bashir.
speaker on. Yes, Bashir.
Sir, one issue which we presently have a lot of mechanization in the farming, and this is expected to go further and further. That will leave so many people who are presently absorbed in the agriculture without any work. So that will be another issue, say, after 5 years, 10 years, when we have full mechanization of farming.
That is why, a scheme like Manrega was brought in to get those surplus labor into a specific, 100 days of work, trying to create community assets. See, economy has to be looked at in a more holistic way, and then planning has to be done in a far more decentralized way, because each state has a different composition, different kind of labor, different skill of labor. Uh, Bashir, it's a big and a complicated country, especially in a country like India. It's populous, it is diverse, it is huge, and any sector of the economy that you do not look at will affect the other sector. And globalization has brought in a stage whereby countries are affecting each other. Similarly, states affect each other, communities affect each other. So this is where economists come in. They keep bringing out policy formulation. That is why data becomes very important to figure out what is the unemployment rate, what is the new areas which needs youngsters to be trained in. A lot of things need to be done, Bashir.
Thank you.
So what we are trying to do is, with these theories, trying to understand the various ways in which various economies thought about the economy, about unemployment, about poverty, about underdeveloped countries, or trying to make underdeveloped into developed. And in fact, in the next unit, next week, what we'll do next Saturday is some theories on underdevelopment, how these theories, how the developed countries looked at the ways for underdeveloped countries to move towards development, and what are the problems with that, and what are the theories on underdevelopment. Okay, I think I've come to the end of my time. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a nice week ahead. We'll see each other next Saturday at 3 o'clock. Firoz, have you taken the host?
Sir, please.
Okay, I'm making you the host. Yeah? Okay.
Okay.
Bye, guys. Have a nice day.